My name is Rachel Morgan, and what happened just a short while ago taught me something that no lecture or self-help book ever could. Sometimes the most powerful way to respond to family manipulation is not with anger, not with endless arguments, but with a single decisive action written into law. You ever had that moment when your parents call you selfish for holding on to something that is already yours? When they demand that you sacrifice your future so the golden child can shine even brighter? That is exactly what my family did when they found out I had inherited my grandmother's house, a property valued at $780,000. They did not simply ask me to share. They arrived with a realtor in tow, ready to push for a quick sale, and they threatened to erase me from the family if I refused to comply. Imagine that, decades of being the dutiful daughter, only to be told you are nothing unless you hand over what was freely given to you. What they did not realize was that 3 days earlier, I had already made my own decision. The house was no longer mine to give because I had sold it, quietly and strategically, to a buyer they never would have expected. When my mother realized who was standing inside that house, she actually screamed, a sound that carried every ounce of shock and betrayal she was feeling. I stood there watching her, and for the first time in my life I felt not guilt, not shame, but control. Before I explain how my sister's own chief executive officer became my unexpected ally, I want to pause and talk directly to you. If you know what it feels like to be the scapegoat in your family, if you know the exhaustion of giving and giving while someone else takes and takes, then you understand why this moment mattered. I want to know your story. Did you ever stand your ground, or did you let them push you into silence? I can tell you the decision was not simple. Every instinct in me wanted to yell, to demand fairness, to finally scream back at the people who had been telling me I was less important for as long as I could remember. But anger would not have saved me. Anger would not have protected what my grandmother wanted me to have. What saved me was the paperwork already filed, the signatures already notarized, the contract already sealed. So there I stood, in front of a family who believed they had cornered me, smiling because they had no idea the game had already ended. They thought they could pressure me into signing on the dotted line. What they never counted on was that I had already signed, but with someone else entirely. And when they realized who that someone was, the ground shifted beneath them. This was not just about property. It was about dignity. It was about finally refusing to be the backup plan, the overlooked child, the one expected to hand everything over. It was about drawing a line so sharp and so final that no one could mistake where I stood ever again. And this, right here, was only the beginning of how it all unfolded. Growing up in the Morgan household taught me lessons I never asked to learn. You would think being the oldest daughter came with privileges, or at least equal footing, but in my family, hierarchy had nothing to do with age. It had everything to do with charm, with the ability to bask in the glow of my parents' approval. That glow belonged entirely to my sister Vanessa. While I was catching the bus to public school before the sun even rose, my parents were driving Vanessa across town to her private academy, tuition costing more than most families earned in a year. My mother always had a way of explaining it that seemed so reasonable on the surface. Rachel is independent, she would say. She does not need the same things Vanessa needs. Translation: Rachel does not deserve what Vanessa deserves. I still remember sitting at the kitchen table clutching my straight-A report card, hoping for some spark of pride. My father looked at it for barely a heartbeat before asking if I had seen Vanessa's art project. She had been chosen for the district showcase. My perfect grades were treated as ordinary, while her every brushstroke was considered a miracle. It did not stop there. Ballet lessons, violin tutors, summer camps in Europe, Vanessa had them all. When I asked to join the debate team, which required a modest $200 fee, my father said we had to prioritize spending. That same week, they surprised Vanessa with a brand new laptop worth thousands for her creative work. I learned quickly that no matter what I achieved, it would always be invisible next to my sister's spotlight. There was one person who refused to let me disappear. My grandmother Margaret was the quiet force who stepped into the gaps my parents left wide open. She was the one who noticed when I came home tired from my library job, the one who asked about my robotics club instead of Vanessa's next recital. She would slip into my room during family gatherings, lean close, and whisper, "How is my brilliant girl?" She did not just say it, she meant it. One night, when I was 16, I broke down in her arms. My parents had missed my National Honor Society induction to attend Vanessa's dance performance. "Why do they love her more, Grandma?" I asked, voice breaking. She smelled of lavender and safety as she pulled me closer. "They do not love her more. she said gently. They love themselves more. Vanessa is the reflection of what they wish they were. You, Rachel, reflect who they really are, and that terrifies them. I held on to those words like armor. When Vanessa floated through college on our parents' dime, changing majors 6 times without consequence, I was working 3 jobs to put myself through state school. While she took vacations, I was burning the midnight oil, determined to graduate with honors. The day I received my accounting license, only one person came to celebrate. It was not my parents. They were away at a beach resort celebrating Vanessa's engagement to a man she had known less than a season. It was my grandmother, proud and radiant, telling anyone who would listen that her granddaughter was a professional now. Some wounds cut deeper than others, though. My 25th birthday fell on a Saturday. I had mentioned it more than once, not in a demanding way, just a gentle hope that we might have dinner together. That morning I woke to silence. No calls, no texts, not even a card. By noon I saw my mother's post on social media, shopping day with my baby girl. The photo showed her and Vanessa with bags in hand, champagne glasses raised. It was not even Vanessa's birthday month. The emptiness of that day carved a scar I will never forget. When I graduated with top honors, my parents sent me a 2-word text: congratulations. When Vanessa finally stumbled across the finish line 2 years later, they threw a party for 50 people, complete with catered food and a professional photographer. The invitation described it as a celebration of their shining star's journey. My grandmother came to my tiny apartment with a lasagna she had made herself when I passed my exams. She framed my first business card and kept a folder of my college essays, telling her book club about her granddaughter, the accountant. She celebrated what my parents dismissed, and she reminded me constantly that I was building something real. Someday when I am gone, you will have more than just my love to remember me by, she said during one of our lunches. I thought she meant photographs, maybe her jewelry box. I never imagined she meant her house, the home where I had spent every holiday, every summer, learning to bake and to believe I was worth something. That house on Maplewood Avenue was more than 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. It was more than a garden that bloomed year-round or the wraparound porch where she and I spent long afternoons in silence. It was the one place where I had always been seen, valued, loved without conditions. My parents were too busy ushering Vanessa to competitions, but that house became my sanctuary. It was the kitchen where we made apple pie, the garden where she taught me patience, the porch where she said family is not about blood, it is about choice. When Margaret passed away and the attorney read the will, I learned I was the sole heir to that house. Sitting in that office, my heart was a storm of grief and astonishment. Part of me felt honored, another part felt dread, because I knew my family would not accept it. In the Morgan family, what was mine had always been subject to review, and the committee had never once ruled in my favor. But I also knew something else that day. This time, I had a choice. This time, I could hold on. The day the attorney confirmed the inheritance, I felt both liberated and trapped. Liberated because my grandmother had seen me, chosen me, trusted me with the one thing she had built and preserved. Trapped because I knew the storm that was about to come. The house was not simply a building, it was nearly $800,000 worth of prime real estate in a city where demand never slowed. But for me, it was the scent of apple pie cooling on the counter, the creak of the porch swing on warm nights, the sound of my grandmother's voice telling me I was enough. At that point, I was living in a cramped studio apartment, battling rent increases and a commute that stole hours of my life. Owning the house meant stability, a chance to breathe, a chance to finally plant roots instead of scrambling to survive. And to make things even more complicated, the house was only minutes away from my new job as a senior accountant at a rising tech firm. Ironically, it was the same company where Vanessa had just landed her flashy promotion to marketing manager. She had been bragging about it for weeks, saying the chief executive officer himself had approved her rise. For once, fortune had handed me something that could change my life. The calls started almost immediately after the will was read. My mother's voice softened in a way I had not heard in years. Rachel, honey, we need to talk about Grandma's house. It is such a big responsibility, maybe too big for one person. Then my father's concern followed, pretending to be practical. A house requires upkeep, Rachel. Maybe it would be better for the family if you sold it. And then came Vanessa, voice trembling with what she called sincerity. I am not saying you should give it to me, but maybe we could share. Or you could sell and split it. I mean, you already have a place to live. A place to live? My studio had black mold in the corners and a landlord who treated hot water as optional. But apparently in their eyes, that was more than enough for me. Soon the messages multiplied. Texts arrived from dawn until midnight. Family means sharing, Rachel. Do not be selfish. Your sister is starting her new life. She needs this more than you. The worst was when they dragged my grandmother's name into it. Grandma would be disappointed in your greed. The same grandmother who had written my name and my name only in her will, who had whispered warnings about how my parents would try to strip me of everything. Vanessa's pleas turned to hysteria. She sobbed about how she and her new boyfriend wanted to build a life together but could not afford a house in this market. She said it was unfair that I got a free house while she had to struggle. Struggle, in her vocabulary, meant living in a luxury apartment funded by our parents. Then the extended family joined in. Aunts, uncles, cousins I had not spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. Messages arrived that felt copied from the same script. Think about the family, Rachel. Do what is best for everyone, not just yourself. Vanessa has always been fragile. You are the strong one. Do not let property destroy unity. The week before the meeting at the attorney's office, my father sent the final blow. Either you agree to sell and split the proceeds, or you are no longer welcome in this family. Your choice. I stared at that text until the words blurred. No longer welcome? As if I had ever been welcomed at all. That same evening, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unfamiliar number. Rachel, this is Ethan Park. I heard you might be selling a property on Maplewood Avenue. I am very interested. Can we talk? I blinked at the name. Ethan Park. My old study partner from college. The one who had built a tech empire before 30, who was now the chief executive officer of the very company where Vanessa worked. The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. I looked at my father's ultimatum again, then back at Ethan's message. For the first time in 2 weeks, I smiled. I replied quickly. Hi, Ethan. Yes, let's talk. But it has to be confidential. Understood, he responded instantly. I can meet tonight. And Rachel, I remember how they treated you back then. This time, you call the shot. And just like that, the board shifted. They thought they had me cornered, but I was already moving pieces they could not see. When I walked into the attorney's conference room that Thursday afternoon, the air was already thick with tension. My parents sat across from me like prosecutors ready to deliver a sentence. Vanessa perched between them with tissues in hand, rehearsed tears waiting for their cue. Even Aunt Carol had made the trip, her role clear. Play the voice of reason while siding with my parents at every turn. My father spoke before the attorney could even open her folder. We've brought a realtor, he announced, gesturing to a woman in a bright red blazer. Mrs. Daniels has cash buyers ready to move. The attorney adjusted her glasses. That's premature. Not at all, my mother cut in. We're here to resolve this as a family. The will was already resolved, I said quietly. Wills can be contested, my father snapped. Undue influence, mental capacity, whatever it takes. We've already spoken to lawyers. Vanessa dabbed her eyes. I can't believe you're making us do this, Rachel. After everything our parents have done for you. Her voice cracked on cue, and I almost laughed. Instead, I kept my face still. My grandmother had taught me during endless chess games never to reveal the next move. Rachel is being selfish, my mother declared. One daughter hoarding property while the other struggles. I just want fairness, Vanessa whispered, shaking her tissue for effect. Is that too much to ask? The realtor slid papers across the table. If we list today, I can have it sold within a week. Rachel hasn't agreed to sell, the attorney reminded them. She will, my father said, voice heavy with the authority that had always silenced me as a child. Because if she doesn't, she's out. No holidays, no birthdays, no contact with grandchildren when they come along. Nothing. The room went silent. Even Aunt Carol shifted uncomfortably. My mother reached over to squeeze Vanessa's hand. Your sister needs this house. Her new role requires her to entertain clients. She needs more than that little apartment. The apartment you still pay for? I asked. That's temporary, my mother snapped. And it's not your concern, the attorney tried again. Perhaps we should get her signature today, my father interrupted. Let's not waste more time. They leaned in, confident they had won. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Ethan. Contract signed. Ready when you are. Actually, I said, standing up, there's something you should all know. Sit down, my father barked. Not this time, I answered. I need to say something. The only thing you need to say is yes, My mother shot back. Yes, you'll sell. Yes, you'll share with your sister. Yes, you'll stop making this difficult. Vanessa sniffled. I've already told Ryan we'd be house shopping soon. You're embarrassing me, Rachel. Your sister has worked so hard for her promotion, Aunt Carol chimed in. She deserves a home that reflects her new status. Unlike you, my father said, his words laced with contempt. An accountant living in a studio. What do you need with a 3-bedroom house? She probably just wants to rent it out, Vanessa muttered. Make money off Grandma's death. Disgusting. I nearly lost my composure at that, but I remembered the buzz of my phone. Another message. On my way. 10 minutes. You want the house? I said evenly. Fine. Let's go see it. Confusion rippled around the table. My father's eyes narrowed. What are you playing at? No games. If this is so important, let's do this at the house. You should see what you're so desperate to claim. They looked at one another and began gathering their things. The attorney followed reluctantly. I drove alone, their car behind me like a funeral procession. As I pulled onto Maplewood Avenue, my heart pounded. There it was, the Victorian house with its wraparound porch, the garden my grandmother and I had tended. And parked in the driveway was a gleaming white Tesla Model S. Vanessa's gasp was audible even through her car window. That's my CEO's car. Her CEO? My father asked sharply. What would he be doing here? I stepped out of my car, keys in hand. Why don't we find out? The front door opened before I reached the steps. Ethan stood there, casual but unmistakably powerful. Every inch the leader who commanded respect without raising his voice. Mr. Park? Vanessa's voice cracked. Why are you here? He gave her a polite nod before turning to me with a warm smile. Rachel, perfect timing. What is going on? My mother demanded, her voice losing its earlier confidence. Mrs. Daniels, the realtor, extended her hand eagerly. Mr. Park, I understand you're interested in. I'm not interested, Ethan interrupted smoothly. I'm the owner. The silence that followed was glorious. That's impossible, my father sputtered. This house belongs to Rachel. Belonged, the attorney corrected gently. Past tense. The sale was finalized 3 days ago, I added, my voice steady. Vanessa's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and fear. You sold it? To my boss? Technically to my company, Ethan said. All legal, all above market value. You had no right, my mother shrieked. We're your family. She had every right, Ethan countered. It was her property, her choice. The neighbors had begun to gather, curious faces peering from porches and sidewalks. My family's perfect image was unraveling in public view, and I let it. You can't do this, my father roared. This is fraud. We'll sue. On what grounds? The attorney asked calmly. Sarah, excuse me. Rachel sold her legal property to a willing buyer. She did it to spite us, my mother cried. I did it to secure my future, I corrected. The future you never cared about. Another car pulled up, then another. Ethan's leadership team stepped out, executives my sister reported to. My stomach fluttered with the knowledge that Vanessa's world was collapsing in real time. This is going to be our new satellite office, Ethan announced. Vanessa, your team will be working here starting Monday. Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came. I added softly, I'll be living upstairs under a long-term lease. So, yes, Vanessa, you'll be working in Grandma's house while I live in it. Her knees nearly buckled. My father turned purple with rage. You're finished, Rachel. You're out of this family. Promise? I asked, meeting his glare. The street looked like a stage set for a neighborhood drama, with more faces gathering by the minute. Mr. Thompson from across the road leaned on his fence with a grin. Mrs. Chen had her phone raised discreetly, and teenagers lingered on bicycles, whispering and pointing. My family had always been obsessed with appearances, but this was one show they could not control. Ethan stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. Let me be absolutely clear. Rachel Morgan sold this property to me for $800,000. The transfer was filed and recorded with the county 3 days ago. Everything about it is legal, binding, and irreversible. My father's jaw tightened as he spat. You took advantage of her. You preyed on her. Ethan actually laughed. Mr. Morgan, I paid above the asking price for this property. If anyone was taken advantage of, it was me. But I wanted this house in this location, and Rachel needed a buyer who respected her grandmother's legacy. We both got exactly what we wanted. Vanessa's voice was a thin whisper. You mean, I have to work here? Ethan nodded. Your department's satellite office will be set up in the front room with the bay window. It's a bright space, perfect for creative meetings. Vanessa swayed, clutching at my mother's arm. This isn't fair. How can you make me work in my grandmother's house, with her living upstairs? It's harassment. Professional expectations are not harassment, Ethan replied evenly. You're welcome to request a transfer to another department, but of course that might affect your current position. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa's tears dried up instantly. She knew what it meant. My mother turned on me, her eyes blazing. You did this to ruin your sister's career. How could you be so cruel? I did this to protect myself, I said, my voice louder now so the neighbors could hear every word. For 30 years, everything has been about Vanessa, her education, her hobbies, her mistakes you covered with money. You never asked what I needed. You never offered. I was independent by necessity, not choice. Murmurs spread through the gathered neighbors. Mrs. Chen spoke up, her voice carrying across the yard. Margaret told us how you treated Rachel. We all knew. You paraded Vanessa around while ignoring the daughter who was working her fingers to the bone. My mother's face went crimson. That's private family business, not when you're shouting on my lawn, Ethan interrupted. And unless Rachel invites you in, you are trespassing. All eyes turned to me. The power in that moment settled like armor across my shoulders. For the first time in my life, every decision rested in my hands. You need to leave, I said. My father glared, veins bulging at his temples. You'll regret this, Rachel. We'll contest the will, the sale, everything. The attorney, who had remained quiet, stepped forward. The will was airtight. Margaret insisted on it. She specifically told me, do not let Linda and Robert take this from Rachel. She knew exactly what she was doing. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Vanessa's choked sob. The movers arrived then, rolling up with a truck full of office furniture. Desks, chairs, whiteboards, corporate life spilling into the house my grandmother had once filled with roses and laughter. Neighbors pointed, whispering, filming. My family stood frozen, helpless as reality unfolded around them. This is the new normal, Ethan said. The team meeting is Monday at 9 o'clock sharp. Vanessa, I expect you there. No, she gasped. I won't work here. I refuse. That's your choice, Ethan replied. Human Resources can discuss an exit package with you if you prefer. My mother lunged toward me, her face twisted with fury. You've destroyed us, the attorney intercepted her. I'd be careful. Assault charges will not help your case. My father took one last step toward me, his voice low and venomous. You're done. You're out of this family. I held his gaze and let the words come out steady and clear. Promise? Gasps rippled through the crowd. The neighbors, the executives, even the attorney all bore witness to the fracture. As the movers carried furniture past us, I felt something inside me settle. For years I had been waiting, wishing for scraps of approval, begging for recognition. But standing there, with the house legally mine and my family powerless to stop me, I realized I no longer needed any of it. My mother pulled Vanessa close and hissed, "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," I answered. "The house is sold. The contracts are signed. Vanessa will either work here or move on, and I will live my life without begging for your acceptance." The police car that had been called earlier turned onto the street, lights flashing silently. My father paled. My mother tugged him toward their car. Vanessa followed, silent and shell-shocked, her tissue still clenched in her hand like a useless prop. The neighbors applauded not loudly, not mockingly, but with the kind of approval I had waited my whole life to feel. As their car pulled away, I looked back at the porch where my grandmother and I had once sat in quiet peace. For the first time in decades, I felt like I belonged there. The weekend that followed felt surreal, as if the world had turned inside out overnight. For years my parents had wielded control like a weapon, but now their threats had no bite. They had stormed away in outrage, but the deed was signed, the money transferred, the law on my side. What had always been an endless cycle of demands and guilt had finally cracked, and through the fracture came silence. That silence was not empty. It was filled with the voices of neighbors who stopped me in the street to whisper encouragement. Mrs. Chen brought me a plate of dumplings the next day, telling me my grandmother would be proud. Mr. Thompson chuckled about how he had never seen Robert Morgan look so defeated. Even the teenagers who had filmed the confrontation posted about it online, turning the spectacle into a cautionary tale about greed and entitlement. On Monday morning, I woke up in the upstairs bedroom that still smelled faintly of lavender, sunlight streaming through lace curtains my grandmother had sewn by hand. Downstairs, the thump of boxes and chatter of movers filled the air. I made coffee in the old kitchen, the one where my grandmother and I had baked pies, and carried my mug to the porch. From there, I watched the transformation unfold. Desks were assembled, internet lines installed, conference chairs wheeled across polished floors. By 9 o'clock, cars lined the street, employees stepping out in pressed shirts and carrying laptops. Vanessa's car pulled up at exactly 2 minutes before 9. She sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the house as if sheer will could erase the reality of it. Finally, she climbed out, straightened her blazer, and walked stiffly to the front door. Our eyes met through the window. I lifted my mug in a silent greeting. Her jaw tightened as she looked away. From upstairs, I could hear the meeting begin. Jennifer Wu, the department head, led the introductions. She spoke of innovative residential workspace solutions and bringing creativity closer to community. Through the vents, I caught fragments of Vanessa's responses, tight and brittle. To her, every word was humiliation. To me, it was vindication. That afternoon, she knocked on my door. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity pulled me to answer. She stood there, eyes red, shoulders slumped. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "What isn't?" I asked. "You living here, me working here. It's torture. It's consequences," I corrected. "You tried to take my inheritance. Now you walk past it every day." Her lips trembled. "I'm your sister." "Yes," I said. "And that should have meant something before you tried to strip me of everything." She turned and left without another word. Weeks blurred into months. Downstairs, the hum of business became routine, keyboards clacking, voices drifting through the walls. Upstairs, life took on a calm rhythm I had never known. I woke to sunlight and quiet, brewed coffee in my grandmother's kitchen, and read in her favorite chair. On weekends, I worked in the garden, tending the roses she had planted, watching them bloom despite years of neglect. Ethan visited once a month for progress checks. We walked the property together, discussing renovations and repairs. He always asked if I was comfortable, if the arrangement worked for me. Each time, I told him the truth. I had never felt more secure. My parents, meanwhile, waged war through words. My mother posted online about ungrateful children who value money over love. My father sent emails threatening legal action, each one more desperate than the last. But the attorney shut them down quickly, reminding them of the airtight clauses Margaret had insisted upon. At one point, they even tried to buy the house back from Ethan, offering nearly double what he had paid. He politely refused. Vanessa struggled under the weight of accountability. Without my parents shielding her from every stumble, her work faltered. Jennifer Wu placed her on a performance improvement plan, quietly confiding to me in the garden that Vanessa's ideas lacked substance. "She has never had to work before," Jennifer said. "Charm can't write strategies." Family gatherings dissolved. Thanksgiving passed without invitation. Christmas came and went with only a terse message from my mother: "You're missing Vanessa's engagement party." I deleted it without reply, but for every holiday I lost, I gained peace. I gained mornings of stillness, evenings of laughter with new friends from the neighborhood, and the quiet knowledge that I had finally broken free. One spring afternoon, while clearing the closet in the upstairs bedroom, I found a box I had somehow overlooked. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written by Margaret but never sent. "My dearest Rachel," one began, "I watch them dim your light, and it breaks my heart. But I see the fire in you. One day you will let it burn bright. Do not feel guilty. Take what is yours and build the life you deserve." The letter was dated 3 years earlier. She had planned this long before her final days, knowing I would need courage and protection. My throat tightened as I read through them, her words wrapping around me like the lavender scent that lingered on her quilts. 6 months after the sale, Ethan moved the marketing team to a proper office downtown. The house had served its purpose as a lesson and a bridge, but now it returned to what it had always been, a home. My lease remained ironclad, granting me 10 years of security and the right to buy it back for the same price Ethan had paid. For the first time, I had a future not built on sacrifice but on stability. Vanessa lost her job shortly after the move. My mother called me, voice sharp with blame. "This is your fault. Working in that house ruined her. Her performance was her responsibility," I said. "Family helps family, Rachel. Family respects family." I smiled at the irony. You taught me that, Mom. Just not the way you intended. That evening, I walked through the garden, the air thick with the scent of roses. Margaret had once told me the Morgan family was like a garden where only one flower was allowed to bloom, and everything else was cut down. She had been right, but standing there with dirt under my nails and the sun on my skin, I knew I was no longer a weed fighting for space. I was the garden itself, growing wild, unrestrained, unstoppable. Summer crept in with its heavy air and long days, and the house on Maplewood Avenue felt alive again. I had opened the windows so often that the scent of roses mixed with the warmth of fresh bread whenever I baked. Neighbors stopped by with vegetables from their gardens, and slowly the loneliness that had once pressed down on me began to lift. For the first time, I understood what it meant to belong not to a family bound by blood and manipulation, but to a community that saw me as myself. I threw myself into work, and without the distraction of family drama weighing on my shoulders, I excelled. My numbers at the firm were sharp, my presentations precise. My manager pulled me aside one Friday afternoon and said, "You've got leadership written all over you. We're considering you for director by the end of the year." I walked home that evening under the glow of street lamps, smiling to myself. The promotion, not just a career milestone but a symbol that I was no longer the overlooked daughter, no longer the background character in someone else's story. Vanessa, meanwhile, was unraveling. She had moved back in with my parents after losing her job, and whispers drifted through the neighborhood that she rarely left her room. My mother's posts on social media grew sharper, shifting from vague complaints to outright accusations. She claimed I had stolen the house, betrayed the family, broken my sister's spirit. At first, the posts stung. But then I realized something important. The people who mattered most, my colleagues, my neighbors, my friends, knew the truth. And those who chose to believe her were the same people who had ignored me for decades. I owed them nothing. One evening, I sat on the porch reading one of Margaret's letters again. It was one of the last she had written before she passed. She told me that life is a long road full of choices, and sometimes the hardest choice is to stop chasing people who will never meet you halfway. I folded the paper gently and felt a peace settle over me. She had known exactly what I would need to hear, even years later. The house began to change with me. I painted the living room a soft cream, replaced the old curtains with sheer ones that let the sunlight flood in, and restored the garden fence my grandmother had once called her little white guard. Every repair felt like stitching up an old wound, every improvement a promise to honor her memory, not with grief but with growth. By autumn, I invited a few close friends over for dinner. We sat around the table where Margaret and I had once shared so many meals. Laughter filled the room, glasses clinked, and I realized that the emptiness my parents left behind had made space for something stronger. A chosen family. People who celebrated not what I could give them, but who I was. When Thanksgiving arrived, I hosted for the first time. The table was crowded with neighbors and coworkers, the turkey golden, the pies lined up just the way Margaret had taught me. I caught myself glancing at the empty chairs where my parents might have sat, but instead of sorrow, I felt release. I raised my glass and said simply, "To love we choose." The room echoed with agreement. Not long after, I received a call from Ethan. He told me the company had purchased a permanent headquarters downtown and asked if I wanted first rights to buy the house back. My heart leapt. I had saved carefully over the months, and with my upcoming promotion, it was finally possible. A week later, the keys were mine again. The deed bore my name, and for the first time, the house was not a gift I feared losing or a prize others tried to claim. It was mine by choice, by effort, by strength. I spent the first night after the papers were signed sitting on the porch with a blanket wrapped around me, the cool night air brushing my face. I whispered a thank you into the quiet, knowing Margaret would have heard it. She had believed in me when no one else had, and because of her, I had learned to believe in myself. My story did not end with revenge or triumph shouted from rooftops. It ended with calm, with roses in bloom, with the knowledge that I had carved out a life on my own terms. If you have ever been forced to choose between your self-respect and your family's approval, know this. You are not alone. Sometimes the strongest love is the love you give yourself. And sometimes, walking away is not the end of your story, it is the beginning.